Welcome to Season 5 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking with wellbeing experts who can help you to stay well as you plan your exit. If you're almost ready to leave and you need to redo your resume, check out my Resume Revamp digital download. It's a comprehensive guide to making your resume show off your assets. For $49.95 Australian dollars, you'll get pre-filled, eye-pleasing resume and cover letter templates in both US letter and A4 size, a lexicon of teacher terminology with a translation to corporate speak, and a bonus PDF on getting past applicant tracking software. Check out the Resume Revamp package on the product page of larksong.com.au and come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 3. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm very pleased to be interviewing Amy Green, who is a coach, a writer, a teacher, and the founder of the Wellness Strategy. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Amy, you're going to have to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. I feel like it's quite a long story, so I'll try and do it quickly. I am a teacher. I went from school to university straight into teaching and have loved it. I've taught here in Australia, New South Wales, ACT, most recently in Brisbane and over in London. I've held various positions, different school settings. I've done quite a lot, and every school I think has presented with its own unique challenges and differences, but there is something about teaching that unless you actually experience that profession, you can't describe it. And I have thoroughly enjoyed every class I've had, every student, and I've also had moments where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to do it. I also saw myself on this leadership path of becoming a principal in my, late 30s or 40s. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that ever either. What am I going to do? But loving teaching so much meant I didn't want to walk away from education at all. And so when about 6 or 7 years ago, I started mentoring a lot of new teachers coming into school in the area I was working in, and also some teachers in their maybe 3rd or 4th year who were just really struggling with managing and burnout and a couple of things like that we're seeing a lot of. And so from there, it was kind of suggested I would go and study some human behavior and coaching work. And I did that and loved it. And that kind of opened up for me a whole range of opportunity and experience to understand the human side of teaching a little bit more. And I think, I started to talk about how we're a person first and a teacher second, and we've really got to look after the person space. And it's so easy to not do that when we give so much of ourselves to our students and our colleagues and then our own families. So I've really been working with teachers for a number of years now on how to do that, and then also how to make the job more manageable. I worked for Real Schools for a little while, which was fantastic, and helped them bring in some wellbeing work to the work they do around restorative practices. And then this year I've actually spent term 3 and 4, coming to the end of term 4, back in a school. So working in a learning support role, working with students who have additional needs, which, again, reminded me how much I love the job. And that you can't, like, every day you smile and you laugh and something happens and you're reminded why it's such a joyous job, but you're also reminded about how tiring it is and the challenges that come with it, and the pieces that make it more complex, and it's finding that real balance. But I think, I tell myself every day how grateful I am to be a teacher, and that those opportunities to go back into school will always exist. Next year, I'm stepping back into really working in the space of the wellness strategy, and also doing some work for edu influencers around resilience and wellbeing for staff, and a couple of other bits and pieces. So yeah, that's a little bit about me in a really short time with a lot happening.
That was amazing. You just covered everything.
And we're done.
Like 5 minutes. Well done.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you've had this really broad-ranging career, and yet you look like you're about 12 years old. How old are
Oh,
you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 36. I'm not 12.
Okay. So
Um,
you and so you would have been teaching for what, 13, 14 years? Is that about right?
yeah, I think 14, nearly 15. I actually was really young when I went to school. So I actually was 17 when I started university, 21 when I started teaching. So yeah, 14, 15 years
Wow. Yeah.
in
Okay.
schools. Yeah. Yeah.
So twice as long as I managed to sustain it. Well done.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been working in the wellbeing space, and I guess one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was because I wanted to make sure that this podcast presents perhaps a little. I get accused of being quite negative and, luring teachers out of the profession. Now, generally speaking, they come to me pretty broken, and I don't need to lure anyone out of the profession, but I am really conscious that it could be great. And if there were systems in place earlier in the journey, it might actually mean that people either could stay longer or leave better when they leave. And
Yeah.
certainly I wish I'd, had a bit more guidance and a bit more of I guess a career pathway mentor maybe. I did have mentors, but I don't think anyone was really helping me manage my actual career. So where
Yeah.
does what you're doing now or about to start doing, where does that fit into that space?
Yeah, great kind of sum up, I think, of how some teachers definitely feel. The work that I have done with teachers in the past and am now doing is really about, first of all, asking them, how are they feeling? Like, I think what you're saying about teachers coming at that point where they're broken, if we use that word, is because we've somehow established a culture that says, if you're not broken, if you're not falling apart, if you're not tired, you're not doing a good enough job. And so we have established this unhealthy, toxic culture where burnout is a badge. I overheard a story, no, not a story, I overheard a conversation, with an experienced teacher and a beginning teacher a few years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. And this beginning teacher was in her second year, and we were just sitting around the staff room table. And she was like, oh, I'm just so tired and I keep working all weekend and I really just, I need a break. And I don't know if I can, I think it was lunch, and she's like, I don't even know if I have the energy to go and teach my lessons this afternoon. Just as all of us do, just one of those offloads where we're like, oh, it's tiring. And the experienced teacher who'd been teaching for a significant number of years, like 30 years plus, said to her, if you're not working on the weekends, you're not doing a good enough job. And in that moment, I was like, whoa, I wanted to, go, hang on, let's stop. But I did. And I just politely said, you don't have to work weekends. I said, I don't work weekends, but as a beginning teacher, sometimes you do have to work a little bit harder. I said, let's have a conversation about what that looks like, when you're ready. And so I was able to support that teacher through that. And I think one of the things that's really important when we feel like that is not get distracted into other people's stories. So if someone else chooses to believe that working on weekends makes them a good teacher, let them do that. Like, that's their story. There are so many beliefs and things that we think we have to adopt because someone taught us, we don't even realize we're taking them on. It's, sometimes I hear teachers say, oh, so-and-so's here at 7:30 every day. They're working so much harder than me. Well, we don't know that. Long hours at school doesn't mean productivity. It doesn't mean that you're using your time wisely. It's about the quality and the effort and the input that we have when we're there and how we use our time as opposed to time spent. And so we've got to start, I think, questioning as educators and teachers, what's really valuable, what's important. The other thing that stands out when I work with teachers too is having some boundaries about how you want to be. And it's really about understanding what is and isn't going to work for you. And there is no one right way. And a lot of the work I do in the wellness strategy is about kind of breaking down the myths of wellness. Like thinking everyone has to do yoga, or everyone has to drink herbal tea, or everyone has to have a gratitude journal. You don't. No, you don't have to do that if that's not your thing. What's important is asking yourself how I want to feel. Do you want to have more energy? Do you want to be more organized? Do you want to have more clarity of thinking? Do you want to connect better with people? All of those things impact our well-being. And if we're not taking care of that, then our teaching will suffer. So it's about saying, what am I okay with and what am I not okay with? Do I really want to have my emails on my phone? You don't have to. You know, do you want to be checking your emails on a Sunday evening just because you think, oh, if I don't do it, I might get into trouble? You don't have to. It's completely acceptable to leave those admin tasks until during the week or at a time that works for you. Or if you want to leave at 4 o'clock on a Friday and be out the door, but work for an hour on a Sunday evening to catch up, that's like, it's the decisions that we make, and we have to own them and ask ourselves, as long as I'm doing it for me and it feels right, then I need to keep doing it. If we're doing it because someone else is, or someone said we should, or we're falling into that comparison imposter syndrome thing, it can become really unhealthy.
Wow. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that there are actually lots of different pathways to being a successful teacher,
Yeah.
and and everyone can put their own spin on it. I remember, I think I've mentioned this in another episode, so apologies to all the listeners who actually like subscribe. Where it was, I think it was like my first or second year of teaching, and I live quite close to La Trobe University, and that's where the school held their graduation ceremony for the grade sixes. So it's like an 8-minute drive from my house. So I was like, okay, that's handy. I'll go. They wanted ushers to help bring all the kids in and sit them down, and so I did the ushering, and then I said to the other teachers, well, I'll see you guys later. And they said, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I said I'd do the ushering, and I've done the ushering, and now I'm going home. And they were like, you can't leave. And I'm like, well, I actually don't know any of these students, because I was teaching prep, which was like the really little kids, and they were grade sixes, and I'd only just started at the school, so I didn't know I had no association or friendship with any of the kids or their parents or even the other staff, really. I barely knew the other staff. And they were just gobsmacked that I left, but I'm like, work-life balance. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to be here now. I've done the thing I said I would do, and you actually don't need me for the rest of the night. Why would I hang around with this excruciatingly long 3-hour ceremony followed by supper with all the parents who I don't know? So yeah, I just left. But I see lots of people feeling obliged to stay in situations like that. And I know I certainly, as I got more entrenched in the school, I did stay and get more involved in those things. But then they were impacting on, my ability to go to my own children's events at their schools. And, I'd have a clash with a parent-teacher night or something, and I'd have to stay at my school and not be able to go to see my kids' teachers and things like that. And that happens. I mean, I know that happens to all teachers, but it does make you start to question where your values and your priorities lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we always assume that our job comes first. Like we always think, oh, well, if there's another family event on and I've got a work event, work trumps that. And I don't know why we do that. I don't know why there's this unwritten rule that those things trump our own family and our own values. I mean, obviously we can't all be not attending or having something else on, but there are enough events and things that happen outside of school hours that if we talk about what that looks like for us, or we talk about other commitments, or we say, actually, you know what, my own children's parent-teacher interviews are on that night as well. Can I have some flexibility? Then we can make changes. But as teachers, we perceive that we have to put on this happy face. And then it's like, why is no one solving these problems? Well, we're not actually languaging them or talking about them. And so we're not giving other people, I guess we're not giving our school leaders the opportunity or the chance to even see the full picture, or to be able to take responsibility of those decisions that might help our well-being. And so there's two parts to what can happen in a school. One, we are responsible for the boundaries we put in place, our work hours, what we say yes to, what we say no to, the extra workload we might choose to take on, or whether we have emails on our phone. We control all of that. But we also are responsible for sharing when things are uncomfortable, or sharing when things don't work. And we can do that in really kind, generous ways, where it can be done in a position that's actually about helping everyone move forward. So if wellness becomes the center of culture in a school, and that's what we're thriving for, I think now the pandemic's really highlighted that, then we're able to say, well, actually, I know we've got presentation evening, but there are a few people with young kids, so why don't you just come and help set up the chairs and get everyone settled, and then you can go. And that's about supporting the people, as opposed to seeing everyone being just a teacher.
Yeah, I love that. And you made me took me right back in time to multiple conversations where the principal said to the staff, if you're the last one in the car park, don't be the first one to leave.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're saying. It's not about productivity. And maybe that person had little kids and they just couldn't get there any earlier, and they needed to leave straight away, to pick up their children or whatever. That's you're absolutely right. It starts to create this culture, and also this competitive culture of, oh, I'm
Competitiveness.
staying longer than you. I'm more special because I'm dragging out my workday for 12 hours or whatever.
Right. Or I stayed later and made all of these resources, so I'm not sharing them, rather than thinking, oh, actually, my teaching partner had to leave earlier because they've got 2 little kids and their partner's working shift work and they don't have any family here. And so they're trying to juggle everything. Maybe I can just help them get through this period. And you know what? I know they make it up when they get home, when their kids are in bed. Like, we all have different experiences and different situations. And it's about understanding what our drivers are and what our values are, but also a huge component of emotional intelligence about understanding other people. What are their values? I worked with a teacher, and a beginning teacher once, who came to me and said, look, I was doing some like personal development coaching, but with teachers who wanted to work on something. And this young male teacher is in his second career, but still in his mid-20s, I think, came to me and said, I just don't know if I should be doing this, be doing teaching. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I don't love it like everyone else. I don't stay late. I don't put in all the extra hours. I said, well, do you love it while you're here? And he's like, yeah, I absolutely love the kids. We have a great time. He said, I love helping them learn. And I said, okay, so what else do you love in life? Like, what else is it that really makes you think, you know what, this is my thing? And in that split second, he kind of took a step back, because he hadn't, I think, ever thought that it could be anything else. And he went, what's my kids? He's had like a 4 and a 2-year-old. And he said, my kids are everything. He said, I actually could do any job because my whole purpose is just to provide for my kids right now. Mm. He said, and when I leave at 3:30, he said, it takes me 40 minutes to get home. If I don't get home by 4:15, 4:30, then I don't get to see them. I don't get to bath them and feed them and put them to bed. I'm getting home late, and then I don't get to spend time with my own kids. He said, that's my driver right now. Mm. So I said to him, okay, now we know that. How would you feel about sharing that with the rest of the team? Because what you're doing is being vulnerable and saying, this is what's important to me right now. Mm. But your colleagues will also stop assuming that you're just slacking off and leaving, which is what you're afraid of. So his story was, oh, everyone's judging me because I'm leaving at 3:30 and they think I don't like the job and I'm not good enough. And so he started to adopt that because he was comparing himself to other people. Mm. But in actual fact, he just wanted to go home and spend time with his kids before they went to bed. And then once all that was done, he would do some work of an evening. And I'm like, that's totally cool. We just all need to know that so we can all work out and support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client who I worked with a couple of years ago now in the US. And because he was, not paid very well in his position, he was also delivering pizzas and shining shoes.
Wow.
So this, grown man with a, professional career, shining shoes to make up a bit of extra money. But the thing he wanted more than anything was to take his kids to the park in the afternoon. By the time he'd finished teaching, preparing, delivering pizzas and shining the shoes, he didn't ever get that opportunity. And so when he left, that was the absolute best thing about his new job in corporate, was that he actually got home at 5:00,
Yeah.
And so he could actually do the things that he valued the most. And
yeah,
he was an amazing teacher, but the job wasn't serving him. And I think that's something that we often forget as teachers, that this has to be a two-way street. This job is a way of providing, an income for our family, or, to support our family. It has to serve us as well. It's not, it's got to go both ways. It can't all be just take and take and take and not give anything back.
Yeah, definitely. I've just spent the last 12 months studying positive psychology. So I'm just about to get my diploma in pos psych and wellbeing, which has been phenomenal, because they talk a lot about that in, that everyone should have permission to thrive and live this joyous, fulfilled life. But the drivers that you're talking about there, about how do we get meaning, how do we get fulfillment, how do we feel like we're accomplishing things. And for some of us that will happen with our job at school, and we will get all of those things and feel really good about that. And for others, we might be loving the job but still feel like a piece is missing, because we get fulfillment and joy and things like that from whatever's happening in our home life, but we don't prioritize that in the same way. And by understanding that, by flipping it and going, you know what, I am going to leave at 3:30 so I can take my kids to the park, you're allowing yourself to have that fulfillment and that enjoyment and that meaning, which means when you do sit down to do schoolwork later in the evening, or when you do come in earlier that morning, you're going to feel better for it, because you've given yourself permission to attach those activities to meaning and fulfillment as needed, rather than pushing everything out and thinking it only has to be about work.
Yeah. And I think there are, like you said, there are seasons in your life too when
It'll
you
change.
don't need to. So by the time I'd finished, but before I left, like my kids were old enough to. My daughter used to make me lunch to take to school.
Yeah.
You know, like it was it had almost flipped from when I began to when I'd finished. You know,
Yeah.
they were able to support me, and yeah. But there were so many times when I was like tearing out the door and, you know, chucking the kids out of the car. Quick, you walk to school the rest of the way, and I'm going to zoom off in the other direction off to school. And, you know, I remember one time one of our kids didn't go to school, like he was in high school, and he just slept in. And of course I'd gone, long gone, and the school rang my husband and said, where's your son? And he said, oh, he went to school like hours ago. And they said, well, he's not here. Anyway, he was still in bed. So that was a bit embarrassing. And the teacher said to my son, didn't your mother get you out of bed this morning? And I'm like, okay, that's a weird question, because I was like at school.
Yeah, working
Already, you know, early, like, you know, relatively early, like not crazily early, but
like
maybe I got there at 7:45 or something.
Yeah.
And he didn't need to even leave until 8. So I was long gone, and he, you know, obviously didn't bother to get up. But there was just it. So there's this sort of double standard too, that we're able to be awesome parents and get our kid out the door, who's perfectly capable, by the way, of getting himself out the door at that age. But also that I have to be at school and be the amazing teacher who's putting in a double shift at school. So it's a tricky one, isn't it? It's an interesting balance, and a lot of teachers, I think, because they like kids, are parents as well.
Yeah, well, I'm mindful we're talking a lot about parenting and kids, and I don't have kids. My partner and I are not having kids. He's a teacher as well, but you know, I guess to give the flip of that, if you don't have children, I always struggled with well, you don't have kids, so you can stay and do it. So I copped that a little bit. But you know, just to give you another example, my partner does triathlon, which, if you know anything about triathlon, requires 2 to 3 hours of training a day, and is, you know, the recipe to test how committed you are in a relationship when it becomes a 7-day kind of event. It's pretty intense, but he has figured out how to train on his bike for 1 or 2 hours in the morning or afternoon, and also do his emails or mark homework or do something like that. He's not at school doing it. He's just he's right now in the garage on his bike, and I have no doubt he's doing schoolwork. Or he will do his training, and then when he finishes that in the next half an hour, he'll sit down and do his schoolwork then.
Yeah.
He's certainly not coming home to do nothing. And he's not ducking off because he has kids, but his thing that he gets fulfillment from, and his energy and his well-being, is training all the time and running and swimming and cycling. It's my idea of hell, and I don't want to be doing anything like that, but he loves it. And so that's where we've got to understand that everyone's wellness and well-being and the way we fill our cup, you know, it all looks different.
Yeah, great example. I had a guy I worked with very briefly, so I didn't really spend a lot of time with him, but he would run the like aquarobics class at the local gym, until finally the job got to him, and he couldn't sustain both, sadly, but he loved it. You know, it gave him a lot of pleasure and joy. And I like because my husband goes to the gym, he knew him. I didn't really know him, but he knew him better than I did. But yeah, it's just, that's a really great example. And I think you're right that we need to find, if you're thinking about that PERMA model of, you know, positive emotion, engagement, relationships, you're going to have to help me meaning, accomplishment, and then health if you want to add that in. that everybody's the pillars of what is a flourishing life are going to look different for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, PERMA is only one model. There are so many, again, different ways to think about well-being and what works. And sometimes, you know, your health will be more important, and then other times it will be connection, and then other times it might just be space and silence for you. It comes in ebbs and flows and depends what's happening. And, you know, if I think about report writing time, which I'm sure many teachers are doing, being the end of the year or have just finished, we know that that's an intense period of time for us. And I think, you know, I do kind of joke and say it's the same time every year, people. It's not a surprise. Like, it's not a random week. We know it's coming. So part of being able to look after yourself in that is anticipating that you might need to work a little bit harder during that time, during those weeks where you're writing them. You know, I used to have a rule where I didn't take work home, but I would stay till maybe 6 o'clock 3 nights a week and just smash my reports out and get them done. I could do that. That was my decision. And I know other teachers who, in that fortnight period, they don't do anything on their Sundays except write reports, but they're not staying late in the evenings to write them like I was. So it's also about knowing, what have I got coming up? When are those high intense periods? What does that look like for me? And what do I need to put in place so I can get through it successfully? And I always come back to what I call those 4 pillars, which is about moving. So moving your body every day, not sitting down, whether it's just a walk or whatever that looks like for you. Lunchtime, a playground duty is a great way to take advantage of that. Making sure that you're looking after your nutrition. And again, we know there are infinite diets and fads and things out there, but it's whatever works for you. I know, as much as I love chocolate cake, if I have it for breakfast, my brain's not going to function as best as it can. So wouldn't be a good choice if I'm getting through a work day. Drink your water and sleep. Like, we've got to prioritize those things, especially around those intense periods, because that's when we feel like we're on overload and overwhelm can creep in and we're less resilient. So we've got to be working on building those resilience strategies. And it's about prevention, not getting to the end point and then trying to cure and fix it. We want to prevent that feeling from happening.
Yeah. I guess for me, like, I think I was reasonably good at most of those things. I certainly made sure I got enough sleep. That was definitely one thing. But I think there was something about the unrealistic expectations that seemed to be just constantly piling on, and the things that I would do initially as a kind of an extra thing that I love to do, that was a gift from my heart to the school, you know, suddenly became part of my job description.
Yeah,
And
like
then
if you're running a lunchtime club or doing something like that you might, or an extra duty because you want to have sport on the oval with the kids, or a craft club, things that we like doing.
Those kinds of things. And then they'd say, oh, so you also need to be on a committee for something else as well. And I'm like, but I'm already doing this thing. And they go, yeah, but you still need to do that thing as well. And I'm like, well,
can't do it all. And I think that's where schools need to acknowledge that teachers bring interests and passions and hobbies, and they want to share that. And we need to, as leaders, I think, on leadership teams, look at ways we structure that. And, you know, it's not always as easy, because there are things like, you know, in a primary school, you have to have a certain number of teachers on playground duty, or there are compliance things, or there's stuff we have to do. But I think we can definitely get better at saying, why do people have to be on committees? Where did that rule come from? Like, is that an old rule we're holding on to that really doesn't serve us anymore, and we just think we should? Or can we look at actually not about a committee, but extra things teachers volunteer to do? And that might be a lunchtime club, or it might be being on the school board, or it might be being on the maths committee. It can look like so many things.
Yeah, there's plenty of things. There's always something, isn't there?
Always, yeah.
We used to have like a literacy night and a numeracy night, which were actually really fun. But there were still 2 nights it was only twice a year, like, you know, one each half of the year. But then there was also the school concert and the 100 other things. So, well, maybe not 100, maybe like 5 other things. The sleepover night and
school camps and
I actually managed to get out of ever having to go to a school camp or a sleepover, just because of the year levels I taught. It just happened to miss it every time. But I had plenty of other extracurricular stuff that I did, and I would actually, on those nights when they did the sleepover, because the school was open on the Saturday, I would come in and unload the kiln and then reload it and put it back on again, so it would be cool enough to unload again on Monday morning. So, that just took advantage of the fact that I could get in. So I had other extra stuff to do that wasn't, with the kids exactly, but sort of support them.
There's definitely room, I think, to look at what everyone is doing in their job and their role. And, I think of PE teachers who are organising athletics carnivals and swimming carnivals. Like, that's massive. That's a massive job. Yeah.
And our team was in there at school 3 mornings a week doing extra training for various sports that I had absolutely no interest in, but they were there. I could see them. I could wave to them and say, and they'd already been there for half an hour before I got there most of the time. So there was definitely
and that's where it really is about recognizing the person. Like, that's not a teacher out there. That's a person who loves teaching and happens to be a teacher, but is giving up their time and giving up their own possibility to do something for themselves, or giving up on driving their kids to school. Every yes is a no and every no is a yes in some way, shape or form. And we've got to recognize what people are giving to that space.
I love that. That's a great little pithy little soundbite there. Thank you. All right. So, Amy, as we wrap this up, what would you... Oh, actually, I forgot to tell you that I'm going to give you a heads up now that in a minute I'm going to ask you what your favourite song is. I don't know if I told you that.
Ooh.
So you can
now I have to rack my brain.
Let that burble away in the background. So what advice would you give to someone who's feeling really under pressure and struggling and just wondering what they can do next and how to move forward?
Yeah, I think, first of all, take a minute to sit with yourself, because we often try and problem solve straight away. And before you do that, sit with yourself and ask yourself, how do you really want to feel? Like, how do you want your average day to look? What do you want to be able to connect to when you do that? What kind of things would make you feel good? Is it about being with people? Is it about looking after your physical body? Is it about connection? Is it about learning something? Is it about contribution? So all that values work is really important. Knowing what motivates and drives you, and thinking, what space would allow me to do that? Now, it could be a school, or it might not be. I often talk with teachers who are looking to move to different schools, and I say, not every school is for every teacher, and that's okay. We don't have to fit into a school if it's not for us, and we don't have to fit into teaching if it's not for us. I have come across a few teachers who have been borderline whether or not they should leave or not, and I think, the beauty with our profession is we can go away and have a year or two off and come back. There is a teacher shortage. They're not going to fill all jobs, so it's not like we're going to run out. It might mean that you give up permanency or you go relief teach or something like that. But if that brings you more meaning and joy, then, sometimes the best decisions are the hardest decisions.
Yeah.
And I don't think we don't have to rush them, but we know, you will know within yourself if this is right or if it's not right, or if you can work through it. And I think, get help. You don't have to do it on your own. There are plenty of coaches out there, or whatever that might look like, people who can talk you through and help you figure out your values, or sometimes the smallest changes have the biggest ripples. So it might be just setting some boundaries around where you feel work is encroaching on your personal life, learning how to be confident to communicate that, building those priorities around your health pillars so you can feel good, finding a hobby. Sometimes it's giving ourselves permission to do those little things that we underestimate that can change our whole world, that can change our whole day.
Mm-hmm.
I would go back to values and really be clear on what energizes you, what feels good and how you want that to look. And then also connect with what are some things you could do to generate those feelings, and can you do that while teaching or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I loved, there were so many opportunities to be creative, which is one of my top character strengths. But what I was finding was that I would do that because it was fun, and then I'd still have to get all the other stuff done, the admin stuff that didn't spark joy for me. So that's where I sort of fell down, because I'd end up getting behind because I was, building props for the school show or something, which was really fun. But it was taking forever, and then I didn't have time to, collect my reports or something,
and
insert menial task here kind of thing.
And that's a great point, because I think too, with teachers, the narrative is very much I don't have time, or I'm really overwhelmed, or there's lots of tasks. And there is an art, and I do teach the art of prioritizing and scheduling, and how to find minutes in your day. I promise you they are there. It's just how we use them and how we spend them. And if it helps, I managed to, after a couple of years of learning the craft of the job, be able to work, from like 8 to 4:30, 5 o'clock, 3:30 on a Friday, and not on weekends and not at home, and get the job done and get it done well. Like it can be done. It's just, it is a bit strategic in how you do things and what you give up time for.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not committed to every extracurricular activity.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I happen to be committed to the things that needed that extra kind of crafty kind of side.
Yeah, you go where your passion is, right?
Yeah, it was fun, but in the end it was like, and like I said, and then it became, but you have to do this. And I'm like, no, I don't. And so then there was this kind of disconnect or misalignment between the expectations and what I was prepared to give to that role.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a kind of the warning bell for me to, okay, there's a misalignment here. I think it's time to step away. I guess the other difficulty is when you get, like I was 8 years in, I'm heading towards the top of the pay scale. It makes it a little bit harder to just go, I'll go to another school now, because you're expensive and they don't necessarily want to take you on unless they're absolutely certain you're not going to be better than someone who's, come straight out of uni. So there is that difficulty, I think, with being able to trial. You know how you said not every school's the same, or not always a good fit. So I guess that's one issue.
And I know if you live rural and you work in a small town or a small area, you don't that option isn't always available. So it's challenging. There are some challenging things in our job that we can't control. Like if you are choosing to live in a small town, or that's where you live, or there might only be 3 schools available to you, some would say that isn't in your control. Others would say it is. Move somewhere else, but it's not always that easy, is it? You can't do that. So we do have to work within the parameters that we have, and the only thing we can control is ourselves. All we control is our thinking and our mindset and how we show up and where we choose to put our energy. And I think if you're in a space where that story and that mindset is starting to get you down, and look, I've experienced chronic stress and burnout from workplace. I know what that feels like. I would have told you I was just really tired, but that wasn't the case at all. And it took me, even though I was diagnosed with that, it probably took me 12 months to realize that was actually what had happened to me. It's a huge thing. If that is happening, like I said, go and speak to someone about that. But again, be kind to yourself and do what you got to find ways to make you feel good and step away from some of those things you might be overcommitting on.
Yeah, nice advice. All right, so now, what's your favorite song?
Oh, I don't have a favorite song, but I will share with you. Like I said, I'm 36. So when I was in year 7, it was 1997, and I was a huge fan of Hanson. Remember Hanson, like the 3 blonde brothers who sung Mbop? I had a Hanson t-shirt on yesterday. I'm really sorry I didn't wear it for you today. I own 3 Hanson t-shirts, and I'm not afraid to say that whenever I get the opportunity to play music, usually in the car by myself, I just put Hanson on and I just rock out. I can't do it when my partner's in the car because he's like, turn this off. But my sister and I, avid Hanson fans. 2019 was the last time I went to a concert. They still tour. So I can't choose a favorite song, but I feel like, that's that. I'll share
favorite band. Nice.
Favorite band. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, Amy, thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Thanks for listening. If you need more support in your journey out of education, check out larksong.com.au and book a triage call. I'm a career transition coach for educators, and I support teachers in their journey out of education and into a life they love. I've been where you are now, and you don't need to do this alone.